Right then, welcome to another lesson with Mr. D. We're going to do some topic today, carry on about our Viking lesson. I'm aware that the last lesson, the sound didn't work too good, so we shall do a little bit of recap, and today's lesson will be a little bit shorter than, won't be a long one. A bit of recap and then something nice and quick to do. If you see this video first, today, 3D, I'm going to do a Zoom at 11 o'clock. I should have given you the details in your DB primary. Log in if you go into your messages there, you should see the details for that. It's 11 o'clock, we'll do a little Zoom. Drop in if you want to, stay for a bit, stay for as long as you need to. Right then, so let's just do a little bit of recap about what we've looked at so far about the Vikings. And then today, I think we'll look at the long ship or the longboat the Vikings were so famous for traveling in. So we talked about the Vikings being invaders, and then ultimately they did become settlers. Yeah, so they started off on their conquests being raiders and invaders and not very nice people. But that was because they wanted to ultimately settle on the British shores because the land was much more fertile, better for farming. And after a lot of fighting, an Anglo-Saxon king called Alfred the Great gave the Vikings some land to settle on, and they called that Danelaw. So originally the Vikings came over to invade and raid, and there's lots of recounts from the monasteries of their horrible attacks, which they did not very nice things. But then an Anglo-Saxon king called Alfred gave them some land, and they were able to settle, and they stopped fighting each other. Got to town a bit on PowerPoint presentation, the Viking. Dum dum dum. So we should know a little bit about who they were, where they came from. So this should all just be a little bit of recap. We know that they came from the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So you could find a map of yourself or have a look on Google Maps and find out where that is. So they were from the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And they were quite happily living there. Their land wasn't too great, so they used to go east and find different lands to the east because they could travel there quite easily. But they were sure that there might be some land to the west. So they thought about sailing and going Viking to try and see what was across the sea in order for them to raid and to find new lands. A bit like pirates. We refer to Vikings a bit like pirates, don't we? Like I said, you can read these in your own time. I'll summarise most of the points here. The land in England was much plentiful. That means it was better for them to use. And it also had treasures. The monasteries had lots of gold and silver that they wanted. The climate was better. We know that these countries, they get quite cold in the winter. Remember, you can pause the video at any time or go back if you want to revisit certain things. So initially, men of war, and the Vikings thought about going to war, and they were very passionate about fighting. And if you were to die fighting, then that was a very noble thing to do. You were going to be able to go to Valhalla, which is the Viking or the Norse version of heaven. And their first recount was over 1,200 years ago, about 500 AD, and they were seen off the coast of Lindisfarne, which is in Northumbria. And the monks there, it was a monastery, and the monks there saw the long ships coming and thought that they were demons and thought that they displeased God. And they wrote about it in their accounts. If you go to visit Lindisfarne, you can see some of the Viking accounts from there. The Viking warriors were known for being so fierce, and they raided and took whatever they wanted. And this is from an Anglo-Saxon chronicle, so some of the monks wrote down on the 8th of June 787 AD. Got the dates better there. Ravage and heathens men are people that are without God. Miserably destroyed God's church on Vin's farm with plunder and slaughter. Plunder means to steal and slaughter means to kill. There's a picture of what this is an English Anglo-Saxon monk in the Vikings coming over to take what they wanted. So that's a bit of a recap. So they came from Scandinavia. We should have noted about where the Vikings came from. And now we shall have a look about how they travelled to these many lands. And hopefully you can make your own longship and detail it and label all the specific parts of what made the longship so successful. So here's a little picture of what the famous Viking longboat looked like. You can see where it gets its name, because it was very long and streamlined. So it was able to cut through the waves and being able to travel through the storms. Had one sail, and also out the side of the ship it would have had oars. So if the wind was blowing in the direction they were travelling, they were able to use the sail, but if there was no wind or the wind was blowing a different direction, they could use slaves or warriors to row the boat as well. So this invention here was crucial in the Viking success. Without it, they wouldn't have been able to travel to England, and they wouldn't have been able to travel to America. They were crafted out of wood, so you can imagine that these would have to chop down trees and taken ages to build just one boat. And because they were so streamlined, they were good at skimming across the waves, the surface of the water. And they could transport cargo and trading. The Vikings even managed to travel all the way to America. There are some recounts of Viking activity in America. And they called that Vineland because they grew grapes. You can imagine that it's not going to be the most comfortable of living arrangements, though. There's no below deck like we have in modern ships. And if it was a really bad storm, I don't think these ships would have survived very well. They had to travel in the perfect conditions. And archaeologists, these are the people that go out and look for relics, look for old pieces of history, have found Viking longboats at the bottom of the ocean. Obviously a bit rotten, but that proves that they went on these voyages across the sea and got caught up in probably storms, capsized, and then were never to be seen again until these archaeologists found them again. And here is one that they restored. They found all the parts together, and you can go visit it. I believe they found this big Viking ship on Sacra Bay. And some people like to reenact the Viking period, and they've learned how to make their own modern longboats. So some people pretend to be Vikings and make their own boats and sail and travel like the Vikings did. A bit of pretend. The Vikings loved their longboat so much that if you were a great warrior, you would get buried and put in your longboat and pushed away to sea. They would put all of the treasure that warrior would need to go to heaven, to Valhalla, in the longship, and they would push your way out to sea, and then an archer with a bow and arrow would set the boat on fire, and that was to send you on your way to Valhalla. So if you were a very important Viking, you would get buried on your longboat as well. They used the ship to get absolutely everywhere, didn't they? So they started off here and they were quite happy travelling this short distance in their boats, probably even here. But they wanted to set sail and find other lands, so they managed to get all the way from Iceland to Greenland, to Newfoundland, to the tips of America. Lots of activity and conquest in France as well. And some Vikings even sailed all the way around France, all the way around Spain, past Italy to get to the Mediterranean Sea as well. So they got absolutely everywhere. You can read these in your own time. And Normandy is, this is quite an interesting fact here, that the French king gave some land to, some French land called Normandy to a Viking and made him a duke called Rollo and stopped him from attacking. And the Vikings also went to Russia and they were called Rus Vikings, and that's where the name comes from. So these Vikings that started in Norway, that travelled into England, into Europe, into America, and into Russia, made their mark and made their name in absolutely everywhere. Here we go then. There's a few questions to check that you've been listening. And then we'll go on to a task and then we'll leave it there. So pause the video if you want to answer those questions. And then I will show you what we'll do today. Two things. So I'm going to leave you this Viking longship bit of non-fiction text for you to study. It gives you a bit more information about why the longship was so special. That extra thing that we haven't talked about is that they would put their shields on the side of the boat as extra protection. That's what those circles are there. Talks about it there. And I'll leave you with this and a question sheet here. So you can either work from the screen now, and you can pause the video here so you can read it. I'll move it up here so you can see. Hopefully my face isn't in the way. And then you could work off the screen and do these questions. Remember to pause the video or go back. Remember, you don't have to do all the questions all at once. I will put these files into a Google Drive document now. I'm going to use Google Drive, and I think you guys could use it as well to upload your work onto. It's just a lot easier than DB Primary. But I'll give you all the links in DB Primary for you to follow on. And I'll put them in the description below. And then last thing to do, a little bit of craft activity to get you away from screens, do a bit of building, is you can have a go at building your own longboat. I'm going to give you the template here to build your own. So you've got to cut this out and then follow the instructions, and you can hopefully put your own boat together. I might have a go as well, and hopefully you can get something that looks a bit like this. It's obviously got the colours on there already, but if you print it out in black and white, you could probably colour it in your own Viking colours if you wanted to. But that's the idea. You can recreate and make the Viking longship model. Super. So hopefully you've heard that a lot better than last lesson, and we recapped about the Vikings, where they come from and how they set sail. So let's check your knowledge on longboats, make your own longboats. Any extra information about the Viking longboat, please do send me a message if you can find any other trivia about the Viking longboat. But that will be all for today. Happy Viking. Let me know how you're getting on with your helmets. And we'll probably, once we've done helmets, we'll probably look at making a shield as well. I'll give you some tips about how to make a Viking shield. Super. Well done, guys. Keep going, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.